we are aware of that, but we just fucking hate you anyway. Hope you die, bye.
Ah! Ah!
So, considering that I've only been covering budget games on the PS2 lately, I thought I'd change it up a little.
Not so much with a AAA game on the PS4, but rather a budget game on the PS4 instead.
I said I'd change it up a little, not a lot.
As I browsed through the PSN store, I came across this game in the sale and was intrigued enough to pick up a copy for myself, figuratively. It boasted a number of things, slick graphics, rich narrative, and RPG elements being among them. One of the things that it mentions is its clever story, so you can bet your ass that it will be one of the things that I keep an eye on as I go along with the game. I'm also going to keep an eye on its moody graphics that it supposedly has.
So basically, if you haven't played the first one, you're fucked. Because it gives you a recap, but it's fucking pitiful, and I haven't played the first one, so I couldn't tell you.
So from my original preconceptions, I figured it would be an amalgamation of both Dead Space and Mass Effect. Thankfully I was wrong, but unfortunately, not in a good way.
This game is actually an amalgamation of Mass Effect, Dead Space, Alien, Deus Ex Human Resources, and Halo. That is a hell of a lot of stuff to mash together.
It's so lacking in its originality that I can't decide whether the trailer is trying to rip off that Halo 3 trailer from years ago, or that Zombie U trailer from 2012. Your guess is as good as mine. So the game starts off the same way as Mass Effect 2. You wake up in a medbay where a voice tells you more or less that you're going to have to do what it says because there's an emergency, and if you value your life you'll listen to it. It's here that we're introduced to our main character.
There's no time for questions. We have to move fast.
I've been through this before.
I've been through this before.
Right, so you end up leaving the first area, and I have to say, it's refreshing that the hacking minigames are actually pretty good and pretty varied, especially in comparison to Mass Effect, as they require some level of concentration. I wouldn't call them especially difficult, but I can appreciate the variety in the game's ability to make them look somewhat realistic to the situation. I'd say that it's a plus.
Not bad, Blackfly, not bad.
One thing that's well known at this point, to those who've read the Wikipedia article at least, is that Badfly don't like you saying bad things about their games or else you won't receive any keys from them in the future.
Well, I don't get any now, so fuck you guys.
Actually, they later explained that reviewers of the original game kept comparing the game to Mass Effect and Left 4 Dead, when they really should have compared it to Stealth Force, The War on Terror. However, they did come out later and correct their statement, saying that they didn't want to blacklist anyone for a fair and honest review. It was just the people comparing it to Mass Effect and Left 4 Dead and games that are actually good.
Well, considering that what I'm about to say isn't anything to do with this game's budget, I'm sure they'll have to take this to be an honest and fair review. I hope.
Like, you don't need a budget of $65 million to get your actors to try with their line reads. You just need to rule them with fucking fear. Oh no, they're gonna get me. Yeah, the zombies just kind of blow in this game. That's not to say that they're not well designed in their aesthetics, but they're just not a threat. They're so damn slow, and at the worst, they'll knock a bit of health off of you. Not to mention that if you are killed by one, you simply have to slip the Grim Reaper a dozen or so credits and he'll look the other way. So, then you can just come back to life and get revenge on the zombie that killed you. These things alone really destroy any chance of this thing ever being a scary horror game, assuming that that is what it wanted to be. I guess it said that it wanted to be a moody atmosphere, and quite honestly, it fails to provide this too. The lighting is mostly consistent, there's nothing out of the ordinary when it comes to sound effects to make you doubt yourself. The one thing that they did do to try and make it scary was spill blood everywhere and leave a few mangled corpses around.
Maybe it's because I grew up in Manchester and this just seems really normal to me, but this seems like a pretty token effort for a horror game.
Now I know that it's not really a great horror game and it's not going to be held up as a classic, but I recently played Until Dawn, and I felt that that game, for all of its jump scares and cliches, is at least able to create a tense and eerie environment in the abandoned asylum scenes. I mean, the lighting is dark and there are plenty of unnatural sounds to make you wonder if something is nearby and that something else is going on. My favourite part about it is how many random shadows appear, to truly make you doubt whether or not you're in a precarious situation. Compare that to, well, this, and you should see what I'm getting at. It's not a problem that I limit to this game either. Dead Space had the exact same issue. Though the lighting was a little creepier in that game, all you had to look at was blood and bodies. There wasn't really any psychological horror. Another game that this really reminds me of is Area 51, which is another game that manages to make a tense, eerie atmosphere in a not so threatening setting. They're able to do this with the lighting effects, but also as a whole with the context of the story. The character and the player therefore are incredibly isolated and are just really facing a no-hope situation. They keep throwing you a number of curveballs as well to make the player doubt themselves even more as they get deeper into the facility. Here though, there's nothing that gives this a good horror vibe. Not even a Left 4 Dead or Mass Effect style horror vibe, where it's not a horror game but they at least make an unsettling atmosphere every now and then. I know that Badfly don't want me to compare their games to theirs, but amateur horror directors have been making scary horror films on the budget of some crackers and a half-eaten packet of What's-It, and this just really doesn't feel like it's creating a good enough atmosphere to even be considered a horror game. You don't need a budget to create a good atmosphere, just imagination and creativity. Fairy Tales couldn't even afford to get an artist to draw their cutscenes, but the game still managed to have a decent level design and atmosphere to work with. It achieved what it wanted to do through putting quite a lot of effort into the design as a whole, and it mostly paid off. There are other enemies in the game apart from zombies, but they're not the wide variety that we were promised on the PSN store. But there are soldiers that shoot back and they're boring as fuck and frustrating to fight, so maybe I didn't want variety after all. There are also these weird monkey creatures called cannibals, which are actually an interesting development since even the zombies are on their shit list, technically making them a 4 faction. They kinda remind me of the Tunnelers from Fallout New Vegas' Lonesome Road DLC, like they're a bigger threat than everything else combined. These are the only 4 enemies as far as I'm aware, though you do get a few super zombies, which is a development that I actually quite like. I feel like it's lacking as far as enemy variety or challenge goes. The only enemies that are exciting and pose some sort of threat are these cannibal guys, when they sort of rush you, but you can more or less just execute them at point blank range and call it a day, or just keep spamming health kits until they all die. These were the creatures that managed to kill me, but in my defense, I was weakened by toxic scarecrow gas, so all they did was do the finishing blow. So after I get through the level, I meet this lady who apparently saved me. She has this really generic robot voice, kind of like that woman in Mass Effect Andromeda. I'm really going to be disappointed if she isn't an android, because that just means that she's just another shitty actor. The protagonist is the worst actor by far. She merely disinterestedly reads her lines, and it doesn't help that the character is completely disinterested in everything around herself as well. It again detracts from the horror theme, because if the main character doesn't give a shit in what's going on around them, then why should the audience? Not to mention as well that she's a super soldier, which to me would make anyone show some sign of, huh, I'm a power-armoured badass. But no, she doesn't really care about that either and prefers to just roll her eyes at everything. I mean, cynical characters are fine if done right, like Nick from Left 4 Dead. Yes, I am comparing this to Left 4 Dead, I don't care anymore. But you have to care about something, even if it's your own well-being. But look how she reacts to being told that she's going to die.
But according to your file, there's something wrong. You're dying.
I don't feel like I'm dying.
She gives less of a shit than I do, and that's seriously saying something. The main characters that I have encountered thus far are this big bulky mutant guy, who of course isn't very smart, and the evil Russian doctor. Seriously, this is the clever storyline you're telling? Every single character here is a cliche, and no, this isn't unfair because good writing doesn't cost money. On top of that, the animation is somewhat lacking. If you look, only their heads are animated. Their mouth movements are completely all over the place. I can't decide if this is just bad dubbing, or if they were originally. This might be a foreign game that's been translated, in which case, maybe I can forgive that. The bodies look like they're walking mannequins rather than actual moving people. Again, I know that this isn't a big budget game with motion capture technology, but that only excuses so much. So what about the gameplay? Well, the game does a lot of emphasis on the RPG elements. The promotional material in the game, for instance, actually focuses a lot on it. And to tell you the truth, I forgot it existed most of the time. It's a great sign when you keep forgetting that you have superpowers, isn't it? It's also the Diablo Champions of Norath dungeon crawlery way of doing it, instead of the more involved way RPGs tend to do it nowadays. This isn't too bad of a thing, but it means that there's just zero customization of your character, unless you just want to give them shistier equipment for the sake of being different. So the gameplay itself isn't the worst, it's somewhat easy and it's a bit slow at times, but firing explosive crossbow bolts at zombies or playing Green Arrow versus zombies can make up for that. Well, it would, but I got my composite bow after the zombies became a thing in the game. Minorly annoying. There are a number of objectives and there's some form of variety to them, but at the end of the day it doesn't really feel like you're doing much different. It's mostly just boiled down to go here, kill enemies, wait here, kill more enemies, push a button, etc. This game is what I'd call a jack of all trades but a master of none. It's a game that, as mean as it sounds, was made by people who I just don't think are good at making this particular type of game. And it's not hilariously a bad enough game that I find it funny. The funny thing is though, the game is actually pretty fun if you play the modes that I otherwise don't really like. In Left 4 Dead or even Call of Duty, I don't like survival modes. But here, these and the generic missions, they take a while to complete, but unlike the main campaign, there are plenty of enemies to fight, and the situation gets really tense. It actually feels like a much better version of Call of Duty's Zombies mode, mostly because you don't die in one fucking hit, and you also aren't told to run around like an idiot powering things up and shit. You also get to choose whatever weapon you want, and more or less use any power up you want, and basically create the character that you really want to use as a zombie killing machine. The game is also quite stingy with ammo here, so you have to be quite resourceful if you want to see the later stages, or at least be good at running around in circles and freeing up the healing booths. In all seriousness, I spent the best part of 2 hours on the campaign and didn't think much of it, but after 45 minutes of this mode, I'd almost recommend this game to anyone who likes this sort of gameplay. Killing Floor, Call of Duty Zombies, Left 4 Dead. It's actually quite a lot of fun. It's challenging but isn't frustrating, and the design of these modes is a hell of a lot better than the campaign at least. Hell, I personally think this should have been the campaign, as it feels a lot more desperate. A lot quicker in pace as well, and it actually requires some form of skill in order to preserve yourself on the harder difficulties. Another thing that I really like is the fact that if you do die like Donny Dickhole, you won't get the fuck you middle finger of doom like you would in Call of Duty, but instead you just lose a great deal of points and are then allowed to continue. I know it kind of defeats the purposes of a survival mode, but death isn't always avoidable, and it kind of annoys me when the game completely and utterly penalises you for it when it's one of the most natural things ever. Next to getting a stiffy every time I see George Clooney with his shirt off, that is.
Oh, that's just me, is it? Well, fuck you. George Clooney is sexy.
I would have said more about the story as I originally intended to, but in all honesty, there isn't really a story. You just move further in the ship and fight zombies. There's no twists, there's no overbearing things happening, kind of like in BioShock. I don't even think there's going to be a twist or anything at the end of this. This is the first game that I've ever given up on. Seriously. The first game I have not been able to finish because I just don't care. I feel like I've experienced everything possible with this game. So, maybe you should take what you want from that alone. I think I'd say that this game fails to meet the expectations set by it on the PSN store. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's a complete and utter failure as a game. The survival mode, as I mentioned, definitely makes it worth the price of admission, and I feel like effort was put into this. It was just either not enough, and some of these things, I can't help but feel like no amount of effort would really fix them. I mean, the animation clearly is a result of the budget, and I think it could easily have been bypassed if they had made this a radio-based communication game, kind of like BioShock or something like that. I don't feel ripped off or even particularly disappointed with this game. It's both better and worse than I was expecting, but overall I just can't help but feel immensely indifferent towards this game. It's okay, I guess. I can't get mad at it, but I equally just don't care enough to recommend it. Maybe if you're bored of Killing Floor and want to do something else, I don't know. Well, that's the end for me. Join me next time when, well, actually, I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do next time, but I'm sure I'll think of something.
Hurts! Minikin hurts! Fuck science! Minikin hurts!